Church. I am feeling privileged to stand before this church today, my first ever time to stand in front of you here to speak. But I think I've become part of this church now, 6 months since I moved to Rockhampton. I don't feel like a stranger anymore. Definitely many people that I've come to know, and we talk together as friends, so I feel like I'm one of you. I'm not a stranger. I want to feel part of this family. But I have another family back in Brisbane. I am married to one wife, and I have a son and I have a daughter. They are all in Brisbane. But I left them to come and work here in Rockhampton. So I work as a school teacher, one of the local schools here, and I have that family and this family here now, and I'm extending my family. It's becoming bigger and bigger as I go into other places. So that's me. My name is Simon Mbugua. Full name, actually, Simon Dichu Mbugua Kanyara Muigai. I don't expect you to know all those ones. Just call me Simon. Originally coming from Kenya, country on the eastern coast of Africa. Lived there, was born there, brought up there, went to school there, traveled other places, and I find myself in Australia now. And now this is where I am. It is home at the moment, but still traveling and moving on with life, because I know eventually it is only a temporary home. Our permanent home is coming. Now, the topic for the day is the halftime syndrome. What happens at halftime? Well, is there somebody here who is acquainted with football? Anybody who likes football? I can see a few hands here. What you call football here, I didn't call it football when I was growing up. So football was what we kicked with our legs, which is called soccer in other places. But here, football is something different. But either way, there's halftime when the game is going on. And that football, the Australian one, is quite popular here, and everybody is into it. And it comes to the apex when we have the state of the origin, doesn't it? When we have the Maroons versus the Blues. And it happened last year. I was in Brisbane when it was happening. And that evening, I think it was the final game. It must have been, it was on a Wednesday, I think, that evening. And I was in the city. I was driving in the city, and I gave a lift to somebody who was attending the game in the stadium. And I asked him, how is it going? He said, the game is going on, but I am coming away from it. Why? We are losing. Is the game over? He said, no, it's halftime. It's halftime, and you're leaving, and you're going home. We have no hope of recovery. It's all done, and I'm going home. So he went home, and he told me, we are beaten, 16-6. We cannot recover. So he went home, and I'm not sure if he actually watched the rest of the game that evening, but he must have been shocked in the morning to find that they actually didn't lose, but they won. That must have been a big turnaround for him and anybody else who may have been giving up with him. So what happens during the halftime? We normally start with, kind of a smooth start when we are empowered, we are enthusiastic, we are excited, we want to move on, we are focused on where we want to go, and we keep going. And reaches a point somewhere up there in the middle where we start getting complacent. Sometimes we get distracted, discouraged, disillusioned. We lose the focus. And when we get the challenges, it becomes even worse. And it's difficult now to keep going. That is the point at which many people give up. It's kind of like climbing a mountain. And you start with all the energy and motivation. And you're looking at the top and you're thinking, that is where I'm going. On reaching the middle, if you look back, you could either be discouraged and say, well, that is all what I have done, and there's still this much to go. You could be discouraged. Or you could look down and say, I've come that far. I still have this, but it's only a small position for me to finish. But then you give yourself more motivation, more energy, and keep going until you finish it up. You would be more focused, more fired, and you fight up to the end. That is the ideal situation. But it doesn't always look like that. But if you start something, it is always a good thing to finish it. We all kind of culprits. We start projects that we never finish. Sometimes we get encouraged to start something that is of interest to us. Could be some resolutions we set in the beginning of the year, or something that you're fired to start, and somewhere in the middle, the fire goes off. Does anybody get familiar with that sort of thing here? So I'm not alone. Yeah, because I have started things that I never finish. One time I started writing a book that I never finished, and it's still going on many years ago. And I keep telling myself I must have time to come back and do that. And we are part of people who give up. So today's sermon is based on the book of Genesis, chapter 11, and this passage found on verse 31. It's about a story of somebody called Terah. How much do we know about Terah? Well, I will remind you a few things about him. But before we do that, this passage tells us Terah and his sons, Abram, his grandson Lot, and his other son Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, they started on a journey. And they started from where they were living in the Ur of Chaldees, and they were headed for Canaan. But they never arrived. They reached in Haran, and they settled there. They dwelt in Haran. The objective, the motive, the goal was to go to Canaan. But they reached Haran, and they settled there. Terah was the 9th generation from Noah. He was a descendant of Noah, coming from the line of Shem. And he, together with his children, had settled in this town, this city of Ur of Chaldees. When we talk about Terah and his children, well, we're mentioning Nahor, Haran, Abram as the sons. We also told that Haran had already died. So they were remaining Abram and Nahor. And when Haran died, he left 2 children. One of them was Lot, and another one was a girl called Milcah. And Milcah was married to his uncle, Nahor. So it was a close family. So when we say, and Sarai was also Abraham's daughter. So was Abraham's half-sister. Abraham married his half-sister. So when you talk about Terah and his family, when he says Sarah, his son Abraham's wife, we're actually talking about his daughter as well. When you talk about Milcah, the wife of his son Nahor, we're talking about his granddaughter. So the whole of this was a family. And when he moved with them, he was moving with his family. They were all his children. And at that point, it is important to mention that these people lived in an area that was surrounded by idol worship. They had descended from Noah, yes, but they had settled in a place where idol worship was the thing. And you can tell even their lifestyle was not quite clean. They were all messed up in their life. But God had a plan for them. Now, before we look at that plan, let's talk a little bit more about this family. Because as I said, Terah had descended from Noah, and he was the 9th generation from Noah. So Noah got Shem, then Arphaxad, then Sarah, then Eber, Peleg, and then there's Reu, and it goes on all the way, Nahor, Terah, and then Abram there. So Terah, having come from Noah, he had a lot of information about God, the real true God, the one who saved his ancestors. As the record shows, those people used to live long years. Before the flood, they were living for 900 years, 800 years, and so on. Noah happens to be one of the last batch of the people who lived longest, because he lived for 950 years. After that, after the flood, you can see that the years are coming down. 600, 400, 200, 100, and it's going down, down, up to where we are today. Probably the environment was changed so much, the sinful nature in which they found themselves, corrupted environment, maybe there was not enough oxygen, maybe like it was before, they were not growing big in size and also in age. So that happened. But what is more important to note here is that when Terah was alive, Shem was also alive at one point. In fact, Noah was also alive at the same time, which means they got first-hand information from Noah, from Shem, people who had been in the ark. They were telling them live, face to face, this is what God did for us. So he knew all about the real true God, the one who saves, and the one who was going to save him as well. And this was the same with his children also. They knew about God. However, they found themselves kind of caught up in this city, a city that was surrounded with idol worship, a city that was against the true worship of God. And they were, in a way, doing the same thing like everybody else. But God still had a plan. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about this city that they lived in before we come to how we apply this to ourselves. The Ur of Chaldeans was one of the first ancient urban civilizations in this world. On the banks of the river Euphrates, the southern part of what we would today call Iraq, just on the southern part of Iraq, that's where the city of Ur of Chaldeans was. And it was part of the early Sumerian civilization. And the Sumerians were people who were known for innovations. And that civilization was later embedded into the Babylonian kingdom, became the bigger Babylonian kingdom. But the Sumerians lived a very civilized life. It was a life that was filled with what we would today call advanced technology, because they had advanced architecture. They had built the pyramids before Egyptians did. They were calling them the ziggurats. And these ziggurats were like kind of stepped pyramids. And it is actually thought the Egyptians may have borrowed the idea of the pyramids from these people. Now, what you see on this one here are American soldiers climbing on one of the ziggurats just about 7 years ago. And they're still there, some of them. Thousands of years ago. These people were quite advanced. They had advanced education and art. These are some of the things dug from the graves of the people living around that area. Advanced mathematics. When I was reading about this, I got excited to know they were quite aware of the quadratic and the cubic equations, what we talk about today as wonders of mathematics, fractions and geometry. These records to prove all that they were even calculating the area and the volumes of cylinders, which means they knew about the pi as well. So they were well advanced people. Josephus, one of the well-known Jewish historians, suggests that it was Abraham who took to the Egyptians the idea of mathematics and astronomy when he went there, getting it from this civilization across over to the other side. So they were teaching the other people things that they were already coming to know. And they were quite well advanced in writing. They had their own form of writing. And we're talking about thousands of years ago, about 3,000, 2,000 years before Christ. Here you see records of things that they were keeping in their agriculture. Portions of things that they were doing. This was dug in one of the archaeological sites there, and it dates back to more than 2,000 years before Christ. Well-written records of things they were doing. So this was a city with a lot of things. And the systems of writing meant that they were keeping records of many things, not just agriculture, everything else. It can be seen. However, even with all these good things, they had one problem. Just like many of us. We don't have many, we just have one problem. They had one problem. And their problem was they were living in a corrupt worship system. They had many gods that they worshipped. They had departed from the true worship of the true God, the Creator, and they had degenerated to the worship of idols. And they had many gods that they were worshiping. One of their chief gods was the moon god. And they kind of got very fascinated with the moon because unlike the sun, the moon kept changing shapes and positions, and it was kind of more interesting to look at. So the moon was more of their focus god. It's not a word that even today we have some of the Eastern religion who use the moon as their focus, even today. You go to their places of worship and their icons and everything else that you see, they still have the moon and the crescent. Comes from there, the moon worship. So these people had many gods that they were worshiping. And as they did this, you can see even more and more gods were there. Terah and his family were caught up in this idolatry, unfortunately. And they served the same gods. That might be surprising, knowing that they're coming from the line of Noah, and Noah must have been telling them about God face to face, and they're still worshiping idols. And yes, they did. In fact, when Joshua was talking to people, during the time when they were settling, he was telling them to make up their mind what they wanted to do. And he reminded them that their ancestors, Terah and Abram and Nahor and all those others who lived in the Euphrates, they worshipped other gods. So it is in record. They worshipped other gods. Yet, they knew the true God. That's kind of depressing. But God never gave up on them. He's always a God of second chances. He had his plan, and his plan was right from the Garden of Eden. Remember when he said to Mrs. Adam that your seed will crush his head? And that was a promise. And that promise of salvation passed on down the line, all the way to the time of Noah. And from Noah now to his children, and through Shem, all the way now to Terah. And it's going down to Abraham, and we know where it's going until Jesus Christ is born. So the chain was never broken. Despite all the problems and challenges, God never gives up on his plan. And when we tend to give up and get discouraged, he still encourages us to wake up and carry on with it. When we get distracted, sidetracked by all the things around us, he still wants us to get back on the track and focus on the real thing. That's what he was doing with Terah. And so Terah, with his children, made the move. God had a plan for him. It doesn't say in the Bible that God actually called Terah, but I'm strongly convinced that God must have been speaking to him. God must have been told him, there's a bigger plan for you. And this is not where you need to be. You need to get away from this corruption and idolatry, and I show you where you should be going. Because why should he leave such a developed, progressed, prosperous city as Ur, where he knew everybody, where he was familiar with everything, and live there to go to an unknown place? Run away from all the prosperity to go to probably some poverty kind of lifestyle? And yet, he took up his family and left. So God must have been telling him, this is not the place, I've got a plan for you, wake up and go. And you notice that he took his family with him. When he took the family, moving is not very easy. It's not like when we have the movers these days and you put everything in the truck and you find yourself on the other part of Australia. Today it's different. And think they were carrying all the animals and everything with them. And they were trekking across barren land. And they were moving, not for a day or two, but for perhaps some years to get to where they were going, because it was not going to be a short move. It can never be easy. I've made some moves myself, and I know it is quite daunting sometimes to move from where you know to somewhere you don't know. Leave the familiar to go to the unfamiliar. And some of you may have made some moves as well, and it is never easy. Probably have a few more to make, but what I've learned is it is not an easy thing to move. And yet, they did. Terah took Abram, Sarai, and Lot, and they went together. It does appear like Nahor and Milcah may have been left in Ur. It looks like they may have been left there. And if they did, that is quite disappointing, because they may have been too much committed to the lifestyle in Ur, friends and businesses and everything else, that it wasn't easy to leave behind. And when the father said, let's go, they may have said, we are okay here. But Abram and his wife Sarai and the nephew Lot, they said, let us go. And they moved together, and off they went. And Nahor, we may not probably know a lot about him after that, but we know what happened to Abram when they lived there. But they shared the goals. They encouraged each other, as Abram and the father and Sarai. Those who made the move, they encouraged each other along the way, and they moved on. It is important when we move together to encourage each other. Sometimes the journey gets discouraging, And when you're traveling alone, it is never easy. It's good to hear some encouraging words, some building up words. I can come from anybody, part of the family. Parents encouraging children, children encouraging parents as well, and one another. I've had myself some very encouraging words from my children. My son, when he was 4 years old, I remember this day, when we were walking in one of the crowded cities in a street in England, and I was holding his hand, and we were trying to cross the road, and he kind of stopped and pulled my hand, and he looked up to me, and I looked down. Well, these days he's taller than me, so I usually look up to him. And he said to me, "Dad, do all these people know where they're going?" And that kind of shocked me, and I said, "Well, I think they know, son." And then he said, "Well, when I grow up, I'll know where I'm going." And I kept thinking about those words. Even today, I'm still thinking. He must have been thinking, there's something curious, there's something marvelous, something not quite clear about adults. They know things that children don't know. And he was kind of longing to be like an adult. And that kind of encouraging me to know even words from children can encourage you, give you motivation. Even my daughter, when she was the same age, being the daughter of a teacher, she had learned a few things before she went to school. And one of the things she had learned was to write her own name, Lois. And she was very proud of that name. And she was writing it everywhere. On the chairs, on the settees, on the bed sheets, on the walls, everywhere. And this was getting more irritating. And I said to her, "No, you can't write there, not here," because I was, just going behind her, trying to erase wherever she's writing the name. And she was writing everywhere. And I was getting angry. Now I say to her, "No, you can't write your name anywhere. Here now. If you want to write it on the paper." And she looked at me and she said, "Well, I will fly away and write my name on the moon." At 4 years, and I was thinking, where did she get that from? And that was kind of an encouraging word to know she's thinking big. Well, she hasn't gone to the moon yet. Probably she'll get there sometime. But it is good to know that you can get some words of encouragement, even from children. Now, Terah and his family encouraged each other, and they moved from the Ur of Chaldees, and their intention was to go to Canaan, but they never reached there. They stopped at Haran. This is probably the kind, is this thing working anymore? Yes, it is. This is the map that he would have used. This is the Ur of Chaldees, over here. And he was supposed to move from here and go to this side here, which is the Canaan, this coast here. It's a long way. It's about 600 miles across the Arabian desert. And it was going to be difficult to go across the desert, I think. So he decided to go along the river, all the way up to Haran, and maybe with the intention of coming down the other river and maybe settle down there. Because it was easy to go along the river to get the nourishment that they wanted for themselves and for the animals. So they started the journey, and they went all the way to Haran, and that is where they settled, in Haran. That was never the intention of the journey. The journey was to be completed. Now, that's where the problem starts. They settled in Haran. They settled. They forgot their goal. So settled that he even named those places. That place, he named the place Haran after his own son. Said, "This is home." And he named another place after his other son, Nahor, which was called Nahrain. And today is called Aram. He got so settled. He thought this is just enough. But the point here today is just enough is not enough for God. It may look like this is just enough. We've made a move. It's good enough. We need to go beyond good enough and go to the complete journey. He settled and even died there. So Terah never made it to Canaan. He died in Haran. That is not really what we want to happen to our lives. We want to start our journey. Some of us started and maybe stopped somewhere along the way. But we want to start and complete it all the way up to the end. So what is the application for us today? Well, we have the same problem. We start with excitement, then we become complacent, and then we give up. It becomes too big to carry on. See, Jesus said when he was talking to the people at one time, no one puts his hands on a plow and then looks back is worthy of the kingdom. And if you're going to start a foundation, you better finish it up. Finish the house, because people will be saying, why even bother starting? We have started a journey. We are all on a journey, a spiritual one. And we all started it, we must finish it. There are many Bible examples of people who started the journeys and completed them. And there are others who started and never completed them. And there are so many examples. I may just pick a few ladies here, like Ruth. Ruth, together with Orpah, they started a journey with Naomi, going back to where Naomi had come from, after all the three ladies had lost their husbands. And they're all widows. And on the way, they got discouraged. And Ruth was a source of the discouragement as well. She was telling them, don't follow me. Just go back to your idol worshiping. Just go to where your people are. I'm going back to my people. And Orpah gave in. And she went back. But Ruth never gave up. Ruth said, don't push me to stop where I'm going. Don't discourage me. Don't tell me to go back, because I've made up my mind. Where you are going is where I'm going. Where you lodge, I'll lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Those are the words of Ruth. She was determined. And we know through Ruth, then God had a plan to get the Savior in her line. So we are seeing here people who are resolute in what she was doing, but Orpah gave up. What about Mrs. Lot? She started a journey as well with her family. And they all went together and reached a point where the temptation was too big to think about where she's coming from. And she turned back. And that was the end of her. She died there. So just like Terah, who reached a point and never made an extra step towards the goal, then we have this lady also, Mrs. Lot. And Jesus says, remember Lot's wife. Why should we remember anybody's wife? This was a particular case in point, that if we remove our eyes from the focus of where we're going, our goal, we can easily end up like her. If the enthusiasm and the excitement is gone in our way, and perhaps we're beginning to feel more complacent, maybe we're beginning to feel like we are settled, we are well in our Christian life, almost like we have everything we need, we are comfortable, we need to get worried. We need to be very worried. We're not meant to settle. We're supposed to be on a journey. And this journey is not a comfortable one. from this week's lesson, you can tell that the people who are championing the gospel, Paul and Peter and Barnabas and all the others, they found it was not easy. But they still persevered and they went on. It is a journey that Christ said, you will be persecuted. You will find it difficult. But persevere up to the end and you'll find it worth. Is it risky? Yes, it is. And we all get distracted and tempted, just like everybody else. And I am a culprit as well. I get distracted. We all get distracted. And sometimes we give up. But God never gives up on us. He's always there, encouraging us, pushing us forward, helping us to focus on where we're going. And He will hold our hands until we finish this journey. Sometimes, as a Christian, we feel things are not going the way they should be going. Feel like pressure's here and pressure's here. Feel like there are people who should be treating you better and they're not treating you better. You feel like the Christian life sometimes is not worth. But God is telling you, keep on going. We are waiting for the final fulfillment of the promise. And He's coming to take us home. And just like everybody else, I've given up along the journey sometimes. And Jamie was talking about a story which I was planning to tell you actually. Coincidentally, Jamie, I don't know how you read my notes. Because I was going to tell you about that man. And I'll still tell you. But he said it. I was a runner like him when I was growing up in high school. And I was running for my school. Probably know about Kenyans and running, do you? They ran those long distance races. I probably was meant to be one of them. Should have won a few medals for my school and for my country. But I didn't. Why not? Because I remember this day when I was running to represent my school in a district racing competition. And I was running the 10,000 meters race. That's going the track 25 times. And I was doing well. A few others represented my school as well. And we were many of us. And as we were going round and round and round, I was enjoying it because I had done a lot of practice and I was feeling good about it. But there were people who were ahead of me who were getting discouraged and they were getting off the race and they were coming out. But I kept going. And I kept going. And a few others came out and we were left a few. And then I was thinking, there are just a few of us. It's not worth it. And the thoughts started coming to me. I should also come out. And guess what? I came out. I wasn't tired. I should have finished the race, but I didn't. But because everybody else was coming out, I also left it. I came out of the race. Who knows? I would have won the race. Would have gone home with a medal. Maybe would have gone on to represent my country in Olympics. But it never happened because I gave up. But this man here that Jimmy was talking about, who never gave up. And I want you to show you the video clip of the same story that Jimmy gave us. And then we learn something small about it and we finish with it. So if you can play it for me from there, Jeffrey, if you can. Is it playing? It's not playing? Okay, well, leave it. We can do away with it. Maybe another time we will show it, but it was going to be something I thought would be useful, but we know the story already, Jimmy. The boy was determined to finish the race despite injuring his hamstring. But we see the father passing through the cloud and going to support him. When everybody else was thinking he's out of the race, the father put his hands around him, and despite him asking him to come off, the boy said, I've got to finish this race. I started it, I've got to finish it. And with encouragement of the father, hobbled along all the way and finished the race. Well, that's how God is dealing with us today. You are not going to finish this race alone. He's always there for you and for me. When it gets discouraged, when we get discouraged, when it's getting very difficult to go along, when we get injured along the way, he's always there. And he has encouraging words for us today. So today, on your personal spiritual journey, where are you? Could you be still in Ur of Chaldees, where there's all the distractions and disruptions, getting attention from us? Instead of focusing on God, we are focusing on the things around us, material, wealth, education, friends, influence, power around us, until we forget God. Well, God has a message for you. Wake up and start the journey, and he's walking with you. Or could you be at Haran, like Terah, settled there? You started the journey, you moved along, and you settled in Haran. And you think, this is good enough. I'm all right here. Are we feeling like we are settled here on this earth, in this church, because we are Christian, we are Adventists, and we know all these God's commandments and all these doctrines and everything else, and so we think that's it? We settled? Or we got to be thinking differently? God wants us to move on. And he's holding us our hands. He wants us to move forward. Take the next step. This is not the end. We are not supposed to settle. Keep moving. Or could you be having your focus in mind, and you're on your feet moving already from Haran, and you're moving towards Canaan? Well, that's where God wants us to be. If you're not there, give him your hand, and he will hold you along the way. He says, cry to me, and I will answer. So to finish up, these are the words that God gave to Moses to tell the people. Just before Moses died and passed over the mantle to Joshua, he said to him, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of wherever you're going, because God goes with you. Never leave you, never forsake you. And then he said to him also, tell Joshua, the one who will be leading them after you, to be strong and courageous and lead the people that he is supposed to lead. The Lord himself will go before you and with you, never leave you, nor forsake you. This is the same message coming to us. Never get discouraged along the way. So, my prayer this morning is I want to give God my hand so that he can lead me to the next level, to keep moving until I get to where he wants me to be. Notwithstanding the distractions in this world, what the Spirit of God tells me to do, I want to do. And I want to move until I complete the journey. And I'm wondering if there's anybody who would pray the same prayer like me. Anybody? Yeah, there are quite a few. May God grant you prayer, and may God bless you. Thank you.